Hey everybody, I'm Phil, and I wanted to show off this Steam controller I got. So let's talk about it for a second here. Um, I got this Steam controller, and it's pretty neat. Sorry, I'm just adjusting some things so that you can see everything just fine. And one thing I really liked that I was not expecting was how well it worked just in Windows. So here I am browsing the web on the podcast overclocked little group, and I'm just pressing this back little thing here, and I'm able to scroll through. And I can use this right thing here to just use my mouse and go around. And I can use my right trigger here to click on something and open a new tab. So it's actually a pretty good controller for reclining and like surfing the web that way. If you're just looking to click things, play some clicker heroes or whatever you do. So yeah, I mean I was pleasantly surprised by that. And I just wanted to sort of go over what I think of the Steam controller, my initial impressions from fiddling around with it today. So let's hop into old big picture mode. I'm using, if you're wondering, this is the Metro for Steam skin. If you're into Steam skinning. And I want to just play some Half-Life 2 because I think it works really well because this is a game that doesn't really have an explicit controller configuration. And it was meant to be made with a mouse and keyboard that I think works really well with this new controller. So let's skip this here and just hop into some Half-Life 2. So yeah, let's just hop over to root canal here. One more thing I wanted to mention though before I get too into the game is the keyboard. So let's just hop over to Steam and send a friend of mine a message. Let's just send my friend Jason Derulo a message. And I'm using the two. Here's what I'm going to do. Let me move the camera so it's actually looking at the controller. You can see what I'm doing instead of my beautiful face, which I know you all want to see, but just for the purposes of this video, I think looking at the controller is going to be more helpful and more interesting. So you can sort of use these two things to like wander around, and then everything froze. Hello? Oh, there we go. Everything is freezing. Let's just close and open the Steam interface. So I can say like, hey, and I'm using the triggers to actually type. And I'm typing with, whoops, and it's got recommendations up top. Steam controller. Now, obviously, it's not as fast as using your keyboard, but it's definitely faster than hunting and pecking with like your, DualShock 4, where you're just using the D-pad and hunting down each individual letter. I like it a lot. It's pretty intuitive. I was surprised at how quickly I picked up on it. Now, let's talk about the actual game. Yeah. I'm gonna respond and say it's great. It's space great. Great can all be done on the right side. Alright, anyway. Let's actually get to some gameplay. But first I want to sort of go over the setting I'm using. So the way this sort of works, now there's no actual Valve-made settings for Half-Life 2. But it actually works pretty perfectly with these default settings. So you can do this sort of hybrid option where it's mostly Xbox input, but uses this as mouse input, which means that I can get this quicker, more accurate, in theory, aiming, at least than a right stick, and still get like the controller controls that work well and like the controller weapon selection that works better than like trying to bind a bunch of keys to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I like that a lot. I like that that's sort of just a template you can put in, and then you can adjust the controls otherwise. Um, let's talk about aiming for a second. I'm way better than at aiming with this than I am with a right stick, just completely. And it sort of changed my paradigm in aiming when it comes to being in game. So, and by that I mean rather than just like moving in whatever direction I want and then aiming with my mouse as I usually do, and I'll mention that I'm more of a mouse and keyboard player than a controller player, as if you haven't noticed already. I'm sort of using my left stick movement to control my aiming, and it works pretty well because when you're using a controller, you've got more like precise movement in that you can control your speed with your analog stick. So I'm sort of like adjusting my aim with my movement as I get the basics down with my right trackpad. So I really actually am coming to like aiming with this controller. I thought it would just be like okay and it would work fine, but it's actually pretty fun and I'm digging it. So something to note, you could have fun using this controller, which is a good start, right? But I want to just go into my dislikes first, and then I'll go into what I really like about the controller. As far as my dislikes go, this this left trackpad is pretty garbage. I think using it for WSD movement is not very good. Using it for a D-pad, it's just a really big D-pad, and sort of asks a lot of you when you're swapping between things. So I'm not a huge fan of it. I would have just preferred like a regular D-pad, but the symmetry of the controller seemed to be something important to them, so it's fine. It's not a huge issue, but it's definitely not the highlight of the controller. Other main thing I don't like is the buttons. The face buttons are just not big enough, even for my small hands. I don't think they're very big. Luckily, you can rebind like 2 of them to the back panels, which are awesome, and I'll get to those. But yeah, the buttons are small. It's easy to hit the wrong one. It's you know, they're a little mushy. They're not super high quality. Which is why this works better for shooters than like let's say a third-person action game like Dark Souls or The Witcher. So that pretty much sums up my dislikes, really. I like let's go into what I like. Oh, other thing I dislike is the bumpers. Not huge on the bumpers. They're a little I don't like clicky bumpers, and I know people do like them, like Xbox controller. People who prefer the Xbox controller, I'm sure, like the clicky bumpers, but I'm just used to a regular button, not like a full click when it comes to the bumper buttons, or L1 and R1 as they're known on PlayStation. So that's just a small gripe, but something that's not going to bug everyone. And the other thing is the triggers are a little shallow. But I do really like the triggers because of the dual stage feature. So let's go into what I actually like about this controller. It feels good in the hand. It's very comfortable to hold. It's sort of big, but it's not uncomfortable by any means. I think it's got a good weight to it. When you have the batteries inside of it, it is the same weight. I sort of, you know, did a balancing act with my hands or a scale with my hands and determined that it's about the same weight as the DualShock 4 when this controller has a battery in it. When you take the batteries out, you can just plug it in wired, and that's, I'm gonna pause so these guys aren't talking over me. You can just plug it right in, and you don't need to use batteries at all. You can leave the batteries outside, which is nice for people who are stingy with their batteries like me. if you want to use the controller wireless, you will need AA batteries, so I might recommend picking up some rechargeable ones. Let's see. But yeah, I like the weight of the controller. I like the feel of the controller. It doesn't feel cheap. Some people are saying it does. I think it feels fine. Doesn't feel. I mean, I guess they're using very nice plastic on the PS4 and Xbox One controllers, and the plastic is, yes, not as nice as those, but it's not like it's a bad build quality by any means. So I like that. Let's talk about the other things I like, huh? How about it, Phil? Come on, do it. I love aiming with this thing, as I mentioned before. I love sort of the dual stage triggers. These triggers are awesome. You know, you can press them in, and then you can press them again. Like the GameCube controllers had like the analog and then the digital input, and I like it a lot. In Metal Gear Solid 5, I was aiming, or there was this button configuration that was community made, where pressing in on L not all the way would go into your hip fire aim, and then pressing in all the way would go into iron sights, and it felt super natural and worked super well. Who knows if that'll work with every game with that sort of setup, but it definitely worked really well with Metal Gear Solid, which is a really popular game right now. So, and I did like playing Metal Gear Solid more with this controller than I did with my DualShock 4, or like my Logitech controller. So, I think it is a better experience than trying to play a game where you need to be accurate with a Xbox controller. I am more accurate with this. As a primary mouse and keyboard user, I am more accurate with this controller than I am with an Xbox controller. It's easier to aim with this than it is with a right thumbstick for me. And I think that's going to be fairly universal too. It's just, my brother picked this up too. He tried it out. He was doing really well right off the bat. Like his first time using it, I threw him into Ravenholm in Half-Life 2, and he just like, it was immediately usable to him. So definitely pretty intuitive actually, and works with a lot of games. That said, I don't think it's the best option for a few games. So with games like Dark Souls or The Witcher, like I mentioned earlier, it's just not the best experience because aiming with this is not super necessary. Like, you don't need to be accurate or fast with aiming in a third-person shooter, really. So having that control doesn't really add anything. And the buttons, the face buttons aren't great, and those are buttons you're using a lot in The Witcher and Shadow of Mordor and things like that. So I wouldn't, if those are the primary games you're playing, I wouldn't really recommend a Steam controller. I'd recommend an Xbox controller or a PlayStation controller. But this controller is great for first-person shooters. Wouldn't really recommend it for competitive first-person shooters, but it's great for, first-person shooters like Half-Life. And that's the bottom line. It's great for that, and it theoretically works with any game. I could play City Skylines with this, and I'm probably going to upload another video of me just trying to play a bunch of different games with it, so stay tuned for that. Subscribe if you want to see that. Shameless plugging. But yeah, bottom line, I aim better with this than I do with an Xbox controller, and that's all it needed to do to impress me, and it impressed me in a few more ways. Thanks for watching. Another shameless plug here. I do a podcast about movies and TV called Two Guys Watch. Links to that in the description, so check that out please, because no one listens to it. Hope this was informative, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.